Let's see here. Moderators. Oh, that's right. Marcus. Have you guys seen the Marcus videos? Do you know what this thing is? Do you know what Marcus is? Marcus. Alright, we're gonna watch this. This is from North of the Border. We've watched a couple videos of North of the Border before, so this isn't something too new for us, but I like their craft, so, and it's also only 9 minutes, so it's a short one.
Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny
Hello,
nerdy
Adam.
things, and wormy dealies is one of my most commonly used phrases. So when my non-platonic roommate introduced me to Marcus the Worm, a literal wormy dealie, needless to say, I was intrigued. For those of you that don't know Marcus the Worm, welcome to the beginning of the rest of your life. Marcus.
I watched this video, but all I've seen of Marcus is this rock is pissing me off. Yeah, that's a good one, though. I like that one, you know? That's a good one to start with. But it's like a VR guy, and there's a bunch of just like little silly clip videos of Marcus, like that. And he gets like a little Marcus and stuff.
This is an anthropomorphic worm-ish character who features prominently on my NPR's absolutely cooked Instagram feed, but apparently is also a recurring character on VR chat. The important thing to remember is that despite him having arms and legs,
NPR,
he is,
non-platonic
in fact,
roommate,
a worm and not a shrimp, as I was initially led to believe. All this to say that I've built a worm-like aluminium armature with extra long arms and legs ready for a layer of clay.
Yeah.
I'll start by encasing the torso and head in an initial layer of thin clay to cover the entirety of the shiny foil before getting to work thickening up Marcus's wrinkly neck warbles, or at least I think it's his neck, as I'm not entirely sure how to classify his anatomy, since his head is just a tiny disappointed mouth sat atop a long triple-chinned neck roughly equal to the size of his torso. For the bottom half, I'll make sure to thicken up his butt cheeks without making them too overblown given the girthiness of his legs. Then I can add his saggy worm pecs and cover the initial shoulder connections before getting to work girthing out his ample gut. All in all, there's not a lot of detail to differentiate between with Marcus's body proportions, so I'll take a bit of extra time making sure his various wrinkles and folds are all accounted for before popping back up to his head to refine the shape of his face, which, as mentioned before, is pretty much just a slightly downturned frown. Once I've poked said frown in place at the tip of his wrinkly neck, I'll add a few extra blobs to highlight said frown before poking some big divots onto the top of his head so I can add a pair of oversized pre-baked eyeballs. I'll leave his arms as bare metal to maximize their possible thinness while I'll add a tiny layer of clay to his legs. Fortunately, Marcus doesn't really have any feet, so I don't need to fuss about making anything more than slightly pointy leg nubs. Otherwise, with the majority of the body shape sorted out, I can take a soft silicone shaper and roll it back and forth over the body, smoothing out the tooling marks and fingerprints to give me a nice smooth canvas that I can then roughen up by dragging the tip of said silicone shaper back and forth across the clay to
gotta smooth it before you can rough it out.
Of all over the body wrinkly textures. Once everything is looking nice and wormy, I'll poke a little belly button into Marcus's gut, which of course poses more questions than it answers, before popping some little balls
this is North of the Border
to create those ever important anatomically correct nips. Marcus has some lovely long fingers reminiscent of the salad fingers of my childhood, which I'll need to reinforce by taking some ultra-fine armature wire and creating the underlying bones first. Then I can wrap the palm in a bit of clay before pressing the exposed 4 metal-fingered hand onto a little lump of clay I attach to the tips of the arms to help blend it together cleanly. I'll do the same thing for the right hand, blending it into the wrist before carefully bending the fingers into an appropriate "Robert, this rock is pissing me off" pose, at which point I can start the slow and steady process of building up the fingers with extra thin wormy dealies. Once I've got the wires covered in that initial layer, I can start adding little lumps and bumps of clay to create the knuckles and joints of the fingers before giving the entire hand a thick coat of liquid clay to help smooth and blend out any of the tooling marks or uneven spots. Finally, with Marcus's body fully built, it's time to add that last layer of texture, which I'll do by breaking out a blue nitrile glove and some more liquid clay. The nitrile glove comes pre-installed with some excellent porous pore-like texture built into the fingertip, and by dipping said fingertip into the liquid clay, I can tap the entirety of Marcus's body, thereby transferring that bumpy porous texture onto his skin to give him that last little bit of fleshy feeling bumpiness. You won't be able to see it, and the paint will mostly obscure it, but this way I can pad the video out just long enough to monetize it.
Pad it
Otherwise,
out.
that's Marcus done and ready for a pre-paint coat of white primer. With my nice albino base tone left to dry overnight, I can come back with my airbrush and turn the air pressure way down so it's just spitting red ink, which I'll use to completely cover Marcus in a thin layer of red dots. I'll then follow this with a very transparent layer of yellow ink over top to give him a nice jaundicey base tone, which should keep his skin tone looking nice and wormy as long as I keep subsequent layers transparent as well, which I can do by following that yellow with a light pink and give his whole body a full once over, followed by an even lighter pink on top to add the highlights. I'll start initially by giving the larger areas and uppermost sections a highlighting before giving the whole thing a once over to help blend all the tones together. Once that's dried, I'll give it all a unifying reddish brownish wash, making sure to get every inch of
that. There we
Marcus's
go. That's
flesh
what's really
and
going to bring
frame
it together.
covered before coming back
There you
with
go.
a paper towel to dab away any of the excess.
Yep.
Nice
That
in
looks
the
really
recesses and
Marcus-y.
skin folds, but clearing off the wide exposed sections.
Yep.
To add Marcus's dark back marks, I mixed up a little brown ink and plenty of matte medium to create what I had hoped would be a relatively transparent paint that I then haphazardly dotted all over the back of his head, torso, and along his shoulders and butt cheeks. Unfortunately, I used a very opaque ink and it ended up being a bit too dark, so once I'd painted his eyes white, I came back and tried to cut back some of the darkness by reapplying the initial yellow and pink base tones, but with even more transparent layers. I started by completely covering the marks in a very thin yellowish wash, being careful to neatly blend it into the undotted front of his body before adding a light pink cover on top of that. I'll do the same gentle blending into his front as well, since I don't want to have to repaint the whole body. Finally, before it had completely dried, I took a wet sponge dipped in some even lighter pink and carefully dabbed it over the edges and along any of the higher spots. All in all, though, I think it turned out pretty great, and the marks are much closer to what I had initially wanted. All that's left to do then is add his massive black irises and give his whole body a satin varnish to make him look nice and slimy, but not too slimy, before covering his eyes in a thick layer of UV resin to really bring him to life. And with that, Marcus the Worm is completely finished, which means I just need to give him a rock that he can point at angrily, and I figured what better rock than my very favorite bashing rock, Dwayne. Dwayne has served me well for years, and I figured what better way to celebrate his commitment to this channel than by immortalizing him as the main character in a dedicated sculpture. Of course, Dwayne doesn't stand very tall, so I need to keep the base relatively simple, so I'll take this lovely MDF disc and give the edge a nice black once-over, before mixing up my favorite homemade mud mixture, which consists of 1 part brown sand, 1 part hole filler, 1 part PVA glue, and 1 part brown paint. Once mixed up, I can spread this homemade mud over the top of my disc until it's fully covered before spritzing a little water over top to help smooth it out. Before it's fully dried though, I can pop Marcus down into some pre-drilled leg holes and fit Dwayne into his place of honor, where Marcus will insinuate that Dwayne is pissing him off. Otherwise, that's us done here and on to the glamour shots.
I like how far Marcus is not in the center of the, thing. He's, off to the side. Those eyes. The eyes are what make it, honestly.
As always, a big old thank you to the fine folk over on Patreon, and a special
it does
hey,
look
how are you
amazing.
to the newest of them. Emily Renton, Adam, Tripolar Ape, Bethany, Phoebe Marie, Morley Robertson, Tornado, and Sneaky
Tornado!
You are the spindly little legs upon which this anthropomorphic worm of a channel stands. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Yeah, I think that one turned out good. Good job, north of the border. Nice, nice, nice.